Hi, I'm Gordon Raquel from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com or follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. This week, I'm joined by Ernesto Cox and Lawrence Gann, and they're the editors of Arcane. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi, good to be here.
So my first question for you was, how did you get involved with Arcane?
Originally, I was at DreamWorks Animation Television working on How to Train Your Dragon when one of our buddies that was currently working on Arcane reached out to me saying that they were in need of an editor. I wasn't really sure why a video game company would be in need of a film animation editor, but it became really apparent pretty quickly when we got there why there was this need and why they were stacking the deck with the people that they were stacking the deck with, and Christian Link brought me on originally, and then we were in need of more editors, and that's when Lawrence came in.
Yeah, it was all kind of Arcane was all kind of hush hush initially. Even at the Riot campus, not many people kind of knew what the intention was. This was before they started expanding their universe and stuff. So it was definitely a bit of a curiosity thing when we got the call.
And what was when you saw the style of animation, what went through your head? Because it's very different.
Yeah, it's definitely a game changer. Coming from animation and live action, having a live action animation background, you've seen it all. And when I walked in the first time, Christian Link played the initial, I don't know if you've seen it, Gordon, Arcane, but the initial beginning of episode 3 where Silco is drowning and he's falling down in the water used to actually be the beginning of the pilot. And we had the recording of Jason Spisnak saying his lines, "Ever wonder what it's like to drown," and kind of going through his thing. And it immediately just grabs you, right? Because
if deep sultry voice.
Yeah, if you go into start working on an animated series or an animated movie and the first line is, "Ever wonder what it's like to drown," you're like, oh my god, yes I have. And he started pitching the story and showing art and any animation tests that they had at the time, and it was mind-blowing. And the way that everything was kind of being set up, going through, Lawrence and I both going through the studio system, it was apparent that this was very different. And I know that's going to be something that we keep saying, this was very different. It's because it's a completely different way of doing animation and storytelling.
I mean, spoiler alert, I suppose, Gordon. You've seen most of it, or okay. So spoiler alert for me, it was when I read the script for episode 3, and found out that all the kids were gonna die. Basically, I was like, that doesn't happen in animated series ever. So let's see where this whole thing goes. Basically, so yeah, it was different from the onset.
So what was the choice then to switch? Because Ernesto, you were saying that they originally, the drowning or the coming down in the water was the opening for the pilot. What was the reason to change to that other scene where with the
bridge?
Yeah.
So it's funny, the story actually changed significantly from the moment we got there to when we actually, when the show was released. We went through a lot of rewrites and all of this, and I think that it was kind of thought that it was because this is the story of two sisters, and it's stories of the haves and the have-nots, but really surrounding these two sisters, it was important for us to start with the sisters and then introduce the villains later. And the Silco drowning scene and the cat with the rat scene with Singed in the lab were actually the beginning of the show. We used to start with that, and that got moved around obviously to end of episode 1 and then episode 3 later as well. And a lot of different things that we did in the pilot originally got kind of moved around. and to make sure that we were telling the right story.
I mean, that's kind of the great thing about editorial, right? It's like you get to shuffle things around and kind of see how things worked. And when we did it the old way with Silco being the front, that was one of the big things that everyone, including the showrunners, kind of felt, which was like, it's kind of confusing as to whose story we're telling if you open on the villain. And so I definitely think it was the right call to focus or shift the focus over to sort of our main two female leads.
Right. Because if you start with the villain, and then go to the kids, and then back to the villain, and then back to the kids, it doesn't feel connected. It feels a little disjointed, and you don't get the real sense of going on these journeys and feeling these emotional connections with these characters. If you're giving everybody enough time to tell their stories, then you are connecting with these characters as opposed to ping-ponging back and forth. Right?
Yeah. And this is like stuff you can figure out in editorial for sure. But and that all being said, I mean, Silco is still one of the juiciest characters in the show for sure. So
now, whenever I've talked to, when I talk to animation editors, it's very apparent that they're very involved with the storytelling. Like regular editors in general are, but like animation editors, you're getting scenes and you're building with the animatics, then going back and forth. So what was your involvement in, like, did you help in getting that story structured? Like, how did you, I guess, what was your involvement with the script writers or in the animators to craft the story?
I mean, so the thing you're talking about, Gordon, is actually quite common among animation in general. So as opposed to, like, I guess, live action editors is what people normally think of when they think of editors. Animation editors are like usually one of the first groups of people brought onto an animation, whether it's feature or series. And so as a craft, we are definitely a lot more involved when it comes to storytelling. I mean, obviously, like not enough can be said about how talented our writers and everybody are, and also our team over in Fortiche as well. But the editors in general actually are the ones helping to put together the writing from the storyboards, and then through that process with the directors, with the showrunners, you kind of figure out and mold the story along the way.
Right. And just, one thing to clarify too, is we weren't the only editors on the show. We were two of the editors on the show. We just happened to be the two on the Riot side and the first ones on. Fortige had a great set of editors on their side as well, who after we left took the ball and went on with other episodes as well, and just kind of continued on from there. We actually ended up coming back for a year right before the show was released as well to help out and kind of usher it through to the end. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because like the editors on Arcane, we were two of the editors on Arcane, and they are incredibly talented guys and gals over there, and they really did some amazing work with us when we were first starting. There was, with like any production, there's growing pains and there's learning, especially if a place hasn't done something like this before. And so there was a lot of back and forth and communication and ideas and just kind of volleying off of things. And it was a really great experience. And again, different, right? It was different. And working with the directors at Fortige, while we were here, there were times where we were in France and we'd go and work with them directly. And there were some, obvious challenges with the time difference and whatnot, but we did our best to make everything kind of work and make sure that we were always on the same page and telling the story properly, right? But I think that it really, the final product really kind of shows when you get creatives that are really invested and involved and really love what the content is, and they're just geeks and nerds at heart, right? It shows in every frame that of the final product.
Makes our jobs easier too.
Did you guys play the game before you'd ever come on board?
I played a little bit of it beforehand, but not nearly as much after I joined, I guess. Or I mean, I played a lot more after I joined the team because we used to hold like weekly team death matches against different departments, right?
So I actually didn't know anything about League of Legends, which was weird because I'm I'm a gamer and pretty big geek myself, but it just wasn't my style of game, and so it was kind of off my radar. But now, pretty aggressively, I think.
Wait, what style of game do you think, or would you say your style of game is? Then?
So I love RPGs. I love passive games too. Like I'm a big passive gamer, and I'm a big open world because I'm a completionist, and so it's kind of difficult almost sometimes to finish a game because I have to do every single tiny thing. Like for example, in the Spider-Man PS5 game of Miles Morales, I've cleared out pretty much all of this island's little side quests and things, and I've only fought one villain, and so it's same thing with like Assassin's Creed, so those are my type of games. But when you work at Riot, they do these team building kind of games, and you join departments, and it's department against departments, and they have like project games and whatnot. So you definitely get roped into it. And while it is a difficult game to learn, once you kind of get into it, it's super fun. I love watching it too. It's a lot of fun to watch.
No, wait, when you say passive games, do you mean like sort of like Angry Birds, or it's like you're just sort of...
So like I'll play I call a passive game something I could do on my phone, right? Yeah. So I'll play what is it, Clash and Clash Royale, Clash of Clans, Clash Royale. I'll play little card games and things like that, like puzzle games and whatnot.
Yeah, because I was thinking more like when I got into gaming, it was like Intellivision, Atari, and so it's like if you don't finish the game while you're sitting there, you're not finishing the game.
Right, and nothing back then was passive, and it was definitely not not conducive to a stress-free environment.
No save points back then. You couldn't do it. Yeah. One and done.
Now, what would you say is one of the more challenging scenes that you? Both of you, is there a particular scene that you found challenging to tackle, and what made it so challenging?
I think now that we've kind of had a moment of reflection and clarity, I think honestly the opening to the pilot, now that I think about it, the opening to the pilot was the bridge scene was actually the last thing that we did for season 1. Because it changed as we were going, there were a lot of like kind of internal focus groups that were done, and a lot of feedback that was given on the original idea, and the original idea was different than kind of what we ended up with. And part of the reason that we actually came back at the beginning of this year was to solve for that idea and to come up with different variations. So Lawrence and I actually, when we came back, how many different versions of that did we do, Lawrence, between you and I? It was all final lighting, by the way. It was already done. And so we just kind of took what was there to come up with different things. So how many different versions did we do, Lawrence?
It's like 3 or 4, maybe.
Was it you each, or because I know I did 2 or 3.
I did 3 or 4. So if you did 2 or 3, then we're talking at least a couple different versions.
Yeah. So we did these different versions, and the Powder's song was a lot longer because it used to actually be one big long shot at the beginning, and then it was so the song was a lot longer, so it was a lot slower. So there's a lot of things that kind of changed, and then Fortige, once we did our pass and kind of our versions of this, then they went in and kind of did their Fortige like juice them up pass, and added some of Powder's twitchy scribbles, and her kind of psychosis stuff and whatnot. But it went through some iterations, and I remember when we first started in animatic for it, Christian Link had actually done a mock-up of what I call a rip-o-matic of what he was envisioning for that scene. I forget what movie he used, but he kind of cut together a rhythmatic of what he kind of wanted, and it was this very fog of war, disorienting, orangey kind of thing. It was pretty neat.
How about yourself, Lawrence?
No, I mean, I would have to agree. I mean, the thing we have to remember is that, I mean, as opposed to now where everyone kind of knows Arcane and it's gotten all the awards and things like that, there was a lot of pressure before the show came out on this very first scene for all the reasons that, you know, we've already talked about, but also just like it would be the very first impression that anyone got. And like there was a lot riding on this show, being that it was based off a video game. The history of video game adaptations was not great prior.
That's one of my questions.
Yeah, so it wasn't great prior to Arcane, and so there was a lot of pressure.
The Super Mario movie was amazing.
Hey, I mean, cult classics aside, I suppose. You know,
heard they found a scene that was removed from Super Mario Brothers.
No way, really?
Yeah, someone found it like a year or two ago. They found it. Yeah, it's something I can't remember what happened in it, but I remember.
Oh man, I remember watching that as a kid.
It's the linchpin that makes this whole thing work, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
Now we need that Snyder cut of that.
That's why everyone's
Release the Snyder cut of the Super Mario.
Yeah, if with our luck, everything moving forward is now going to be, you know, 4-hour long, like 8-episode miniseries, basically. So. But yeah, I just have to echo Ernesto in that regard. It's just that there was a lot riding on the opening of this show, and so I think appropriately a lot of attention was put towards trying to make that as good as we could, and then I think time has shown that, you know, thankfully the correct choices were made.
What was the pressure like? Because like you said, other than you guys and I would say Sonic, game movies have had a pretty rough go of it.
No, I mean the pressure was primarily. I mean, pressure was primarily like both internally us as creatives because we knew kind of, you know, what was out there already, but also Riot has, like the company Riot has a like stalwart, you know, dedication to quality. I mean, we could tell you stories, one of which being that like we actually paused the entire production at one point because the writing just wasn't there. So they were really committed to getting this correct. And so you can imagine that this being kind of their first step towards expanding their universe and opening up all these, you know, things, they really wanted to make sure it was correct. So there was a lot of internal pressure, both on the company itself, but also just us as creatives who wanted to make something that as geeks, we would be proud watching and not add to sort of the sordid history of video game adaptations.
Now, you know, you were talking about like that sense of dedication. So how long did this whole production take, with things like shutting down and everything? How long did you guys spend on this in post?
So we didn't shut down, we paused, right?
Yeah, sorry, pause.
It wasn't really a shutdown, or actually technically a pause. It was we went back to script to kind of make sure that, and that was huge because for a studio to have the kind of self-awareness,
the guts,
really, to say, hey, we need to hold off. This is not where we need it to be. Let's fix this. It's huge. And also we've never experienced that, especially how far in we were to begin with. We'd never ever experienced something like that before. And the whole process took 7 years, 6.5, 7 years.
Wow.
Something like that. Yeah, I believe
6.5, 7 years. Lawrence and I were there for, I believe, a total about 3.5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is, I will say this, it is very different. When I started in the industry, I worked on a kids show and we were banging those things out like a couple weeks.
It's different even today. Like there is no show out there that spends this long trying to perfect a single season. Like,
yeah, that's still the case. I mean, Gordon, I mean, you know, Dragons, we did 130 episodes in 6 years, 6.5, 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's still the case. You know, you're still kicking out because it's a different pipeline. It's different workflow, right? And to a certain degree, Arcane was treated like a feature in that way, or
very much,
or multiple features in that way.
The process even, right? Like we had multiple revisions, like multiple takes on individual shots, like things were sent back and forth quite a bit versus a television paradigm where it's one and done kind of scenario, right? And it's out the door. So
I mean, even our scratch sessions are, for those who don't know, like scratch recordings, you kind of just do temp scratch with people that you have or actors or whatnot. Even that was like really high quality. We recorded it in Riot's sound studios and with really high quality mics and everything soundproof, and it didn't sound bad. And it was really good.
It wasn't me and Ernesto on our iPhones.
I mean, I just came off of a movie, I kid you not, a feature that I went on to after Arcane. I was on for another 3 years. I was 90% of the voices in that movie I'll probably be that up until, they start recording production. Right? Oh, actually, no, we recorded like production scratch right before I left. But yeah, so it's rare, and that's just me with my mics and all my stuff, but everything that they did, they really tried to do it at a really high quality. Christian Link, the showrunner, having a music background, he spent a lot of time and energy thinking about music. The scene at the end of episode 3 where Vi leaves Powder, right? Mm-hmm. We had a rough track of that song already with Christian's voice when we were in animatic. It was beautiful when we were working on it. We had the Dear Friends Across the River, like we had like Powder's Lullaby when we were in animatic.
Wow.
So
has ever in your career have you found that any of your scratches ended up in the final project? Because I had a friend who they had like it was just like whatever, a store clerk or something was just like thank you or something like that, and they were like, you know what, let's just not re-record that. Has any of yours ever ended up in the show?
I know that it's happened to people before, but for me, no. We're very meticulous in making sure that everything is in place, right? Because that has implications and ramifications in them itself.
You might enter the Actors Guild.
Yeah, there's a whole process at the end where you have to make sure that every single voice is accounted for. But I mean, scratch love is a thing. Like there are times, there have been on some features that I've worked on where the director and producer fall so in love with the scratch record that they've been hearing over and over again that they actually greenlight it into final. So I mean, it definitely happens.
Absolutely.
Now, Lawrence, you mentioned earlier, so since you've already spoiled it, I will mention all the kids dying in episode 3 in stuff, because that's such a big thing to do.
Yes.
What are the conversations around that? Like, were people like, no, we can't do that, or what was the discussion like?
No, I mean the script was already written, by the time I read it. So I mean, if there were discussions in the writing room, I wasn't a part of it. But as far as the discussions in the edit room, when they come, we were all on board with that. I mean, this was,
like,
I mean,
let them die.
Yeah, let them, because just because it's on a story level, it's such a great, like, inciting incident for our main characters, right? Like it really launches both of their stories into the stratosphere. And then for both Ernesto and I, having both come from kind of your more traditional family friendly stuff, it was such a refreshing thing to be able to tell something that was a bit darker and a bit more poignant when it came to like our characters. So yeah, we were all 110% in on it from like day one, basically.
Yeah, I know from talking to Alex Yee and Christian Link that no matter how much the story changed, because even episode 3 did change a fair amount. We had another version of episode 3 when we were there, right? And then when they went back into script, it changed. The one thing that didn't change was that the kids were always going to die, and it was always going to be Powder's fault. And especially from the moment the bridge fight starts all the way to the end, that or when the kids show up to try and free Vander all the way to the end, that was always going to be the case. How everything else played out before that, a lot of that changed, but from that moment to the end was always the same. And it needed to be grounded. Her pain and her psychosis and all her stuff needed to be grounded in grief and tragedy and loss, right? And that's the moment. That's the moment that kind of sets everything into motion that happens moving forward. And whatever the League of Legends cinematic universe is going to be, it all stems from that moment, that one choice, that one mistake, right?
A choice made out of care and love that just ended in tragedy, which is it's so tasty.
Now I have one last question for you guys. We've been stuck in this pandemic for quite a while. Depending on where you are in the world, we're gearing up for our 5th wave. Is there a show or a movie discovered on streaming networks that people can check out if they get locked in again?
Man, oh man. I mean, I guess my kind of go-to nowadays is I've been watching a lot of anime. So I mean, my current my current dish is I'm watching Demon Slayer, which is no secret to anyone that's part of the community. It's huge. I'm just playing catch up, frankly. But if you haven't watched it already, I would definitely recommend people to check out Attack on Titan. The final season comes out next year, and it is some of the best, storytelling / social commentary I've seen in a long time. I mean, clearly I'm a big fan. So, but yeah, if you haven't checked that out yet, I would definitely recommend it to all your viewers. It's such a great watch.
How about yourself, Ernesto?
Mine is completely on the opposite end of this spectrum. While my story sensibility tends to lean towards a little darker, when I watch stuff on TV, I watch it to unwind and disconnect from something different than what I'm kind of used to. So I actually discovered this show called Impractical Jokers.
Oh yeah.
And I've been obsessed with that show, and it's hilarious. And so at least to me, it's so funny, and it's kind of, it's a what is it? What's the tagline? It's four lifelong friends who compete to embarrass each other, right?
Yeah.
And it's I don't know. I just think it's like good fun, and it's nothing is like terrible and mean spirited, and it just makes me laugh. And I think that in times like this, like laughing is really, it's kind of keeping your humor up and your everything up is important. So that's one that I found that really kind of helped.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you guys.
Hey,
yeah, you bet, man.
And that's our show for this week. Make sure to check out filmmakeru.com for all our new courses. And of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Again, thank you, Ernesto and Lawrence. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.